to have Mr. Joe Theismann here with me, picture in picture. We started talking back, I think, in 2009, 2010, and
Yeah.
now we are here together once again. Notre Dame royalty, Washington Commander royalty as well in my book. Super Bowl champion of Super Bowl XVII over the Miami Dolphins. Mr. Theismann, how we doing?
Good morning, DT. Hope you're doing well. I had a great couple of weeks getting ready for the national championship game, and of course the NFC championship. And since then, things didn't quite go the way we wanted, but neither of the teams quit, and both of them I'm very proud of.
Yeah, and I want to start with Notre Dame because I got to be with them at the College Football Playoff National Championship game and got to cover all the way through. Your thoughts on the 12-team playoff? Because Molly McGrath at ESPN, when I interviewed her, she said something to me that really struck me. She said, if we didn't have a 12-team this year, we wouldn't have the two teams playing for the national championship because Notre Dame and Ohio State wouldn't have made it into the four. So your thoughts on 12 teams, if you thought it was a good bracket, a good system, and about Notre Dame making it all the way through?
Well, first of all, I think it is a good system. Notre Dame, as an independent, was given an opportunity really to participate. I mean, obviously it was the first year, so there are little things that I think they need to tweak. For example, if you have the best record in college football or one of the best records, and you don't win the conference, you shouldn't necessarily be denied a bye. I mean, it's all about positioning yourself in the best possible way from a seasonal standpoint to
Yeah.
be able to be positioned in the playoffs. And now it's just conference champions that wound up getting by. So that's something I think they're going to have to take a look at. I do feel like 12 is enough, but we're running on 15, 16 games now for college football players, Dan. I mean, we're paying them like professionals. I guess we're making the season like a professional season as well. And then alongside the 12-team playoff, you really have to take a hard look at the portal dates. For example, Penn State's backup quarterback opted out of that game.
Yeah.
An opportunity in the playoffs. He's not a part of the team because of the portal. So I think that affects the college playoffs as well. So there's things that need to be done, but I think for the first time out, it came off very, very well.
Yeah, and you brought up the fact of the portal open dates, and it's really their open dates are very poor in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right after the end of the regular season, before a bowl game is played, and before there's the college football playoff, you can opt out. So a lot of these bowl games saw that teams had opted out. I mean, Marshall had lost so many players to the portal that they decided to not go to a bowl game against Army. And then Syracuse, my hometown, played in a bowl game against Washington State, where Washington State had over 20 players and their head coach no longer a part of that team. So, I mean, it seems like it's normal, very understandable, common sense here to talk about, Joe. But I would imagine that as we move forward, we should maybe look at the portal opening after everything ends. So let the bowl games be played, let the college football playoff be played, because I'm sure, I mean, you have an ear to the ground. I'm sure you have friends in the business. I had coaches telling me that while they were preparing for college football playoff games, they had their players being called by other coaches on other programs asking them to get in the portal.
I know it would be like if you're in the last year of your contract at let's say the Dallas Cowboys, and you're getting a call from the New York Giants or the Kansas City Chiefs or the Las Vegas Raiders, while you're trying to prepare for the remainder of the season or the playoffs. It's a little absurd. Again, that is something that really needs to be examined. And then we see a lot of guys and gals staying in college because they're making more money than they would as pros. And what scares me a little bit about the NIL situation is when universities have the capability to pay the players, there are universities with a lot more money than others, which is going to create an incredible imbalance. And to me, so you really got to take a step back and look at the NIL and see what's best for college football players, what's best for those student athletes. You have to step back and take a look at it and say what's best regarding the portal when it comes to teams having a chance to compete for a title. I think those two things need to be examined much more closely than we've just accepted the norm right now.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it's here, and it seems like obviously these things are here to stay because you're not going to put Pandora back in the box. But I mean, it seems like it was all kind of done prematurely. We were dealing with the beginning of a pandemic at the time that California state law had made the decision that they were going to allow name, image, and likeness. And then the portal, which had been open for other sports but wasn't really kind of spoken about, it became kind of just a free agent frenzy because you don't have to sit out a year anymore. Coaches can't give you a list of schools you can't go to. You can transfer within conference if you'd like to. What can we do as we step forward, Joe, to corral this? I mean, can you put a fence around the horses after they've been running wild for 5 or 6 years now?
Well, I think you have to. I really, you have to do something regarding the portal. I mean, you just can't have teams deciding not to participate. I mean, this is your last year. Basically, this is your last year of college football. You have a chance to play in a bowl game. Those times were very important to me, and I enjoyed the Cotton Bowl, the two I played in, and having an opportunity to be able to do that. Have an opportunity to participate in a bowl raises money for the university, not necessarily for the football program, but for the university so that it can be used in other places.
Right.
So it's that needs to be examined as far as the portal goes. The NILs, like I said, if you have a school that has a lot of money, they're going to pay a lot of money. And this is what bothers me, is the University of Tennessee, and I believe I'm correct in this, are raising their ticket prices 20%, football ticket prices 20%, to raise money to compete in the NIL market. Well, why don't you raise your ticket prices to compete in the architectural market?
Yeah.
Or the bioscience market, or someplace, where it's not so obvious that you're just trying to raise money to pay players. And I'll tell you something, a lot of the players they go get only stay a year anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, there needs to be a time frame on as far as the portal goes. There needs to be a time frame that you're committed to. Maybe you commit to 2 years. You're at this particular university 2 years. After that, you go do what you want. I think they have to change the committal dates. I think that has to be taken and examined. And the NIL, that genie's out of the bottle. You've got alumni with tremendous amounts of money that are throwing them at the university. I just wish they'd consider putting that money, or some of it anyway, to other uses at the universities.
Yeah, and like you said about Tennessee, their original numbers of what they wanted to raise it, they had a percentage, they increased the percentage. They're calling it a quote unquote talent fee to pay the players here. And I mean, it's just wild. I have to ask you this question, Joe. You have done a lot of great things in your career, and you've been a spokesperson, you've been on different commercials, you've had the opportunity to utilize your brand in different ways. If Joe Theismann had NIL back in the day, would you be someone who partook in NIL?
Um, it's a very difficult question to answer, only because then you have to go back and examine the whole situation. You're a young, you're 18, 19-year-old kid. Certainly you have counsels now, you have, attorneys, now you have managers, now you have agents, there's the family involved. I really don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm not a rear view mirror guy, Dan. I'm sort of the guy that looks through the windshield and sees what's out front. I would, I guess the logical answer people would expect is it would depend on how much money was available. But that's not for me at the university. The University of Notre Dame offered me a scholarship. Just as an example, I believe SMU, the tuition is $85,000 a year. If you're on scholarship at a university like that, let's say the number is $70,000 a year for tuition. If you're on scholarship, you get room, board, books, and tuition. Roughly 90, let's say 85, $90,000. You're actually getting that other parents have to pay the university for. And I've argued this point time and time again. And you keep saying that the athletes are not being compensated. And that to me is a ridiculous argument, because you are being compensated with your scholarship, actually being given more than just the tuition.
Yeah.
And would I have considered the NIL? I really don't know what I'd have considered when I was 19, 20 years old. I mean, um, like I said, that's sort of water under the bridge. And I think we need to focus on taking a hard look at what's here today. So many things have changed in sports and society and life. We need to take a look at how can we make collegiate football something that people can enjoy again without wondering, just like they do about the NFL, is my favorite player going to be here or gone next year?
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a wonderful point in that, and like you said, when people say, you know, players aren't being compensated, but you look at the fact of, and as you're saying that, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, $90,000 a year that all of these student athletes aren't paying. When you see this constant rise in tuition for a student like me who got recruited to play D3 basketball, there's no money in that, there's no tuition in that. I had to gain money from my grades. I got a presidential scholarship. I got a scholarship from one of the places that I was working at the time, offered scholarship for books and whatnot. And so I look at that and I say to myself, if the price of tuition keeps going up and this free tuition keeps going to student athletes, and we're now expanding the rosters of college football, then we shouldn't be surprised when the tuition for a student like myself is higher, because we're trying to offset the cost, because the school's not going to eat the cost. They're going to give the
No,
cost to somebody else.
it becomes prohibitive for you to be able to get into the university, to be able to do the things you want to do. There's a lot of factors to consider in it, and I certainly don't have the answers, but I think there are people that are involved in making the rules that need to sit down and examine what they believe might be best for college football.
And so that question becomes here with Joe Theismann, Super Bowl champion and Notre Dame and Commanders quarterback, alum here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios. Do we need a commissioner of college football?
There's so many governing bodies now, Dan. Who knows what? I mean, what authority would the commissioner have? I mean, take Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the NFL. The NFL is made up, actually, I don't know if people realize this. Each of those teams are members of an association,
Yeah.
and Roger is the commissioner of the NFL Association of Owners. And so everybody has a voice, and there's different committees that are involved in the NFL. And I don't know how the NCAA really works. I would be remiss in trying to state something that isn't known for me as far as a fact goes, but I'm assuming that there are different elements inside the NCAA where certain people are on certain committees that examine certain things that are going on in college football.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see all of these things, hopefully, have some type of parameters that make sense as we step forward, as we try to return to common sense, essentially. You mentioned being a part of the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic a couple times. I've covered that bowl a few times, was down there for this season with Texas and Ohio State. What did you like about the Cotton Bowl and in your experience there? Because that's one of the bowls I really got to sink my teeth into these last few years. So I'd love to get your thoughts on actually playing in the bowl.
Well, actually, as a player, you don't get to enjoy all the amenities. You get to go out and, maybe you compete in bowling or something else, some type of activities. You get to spend a little time with players from other teams. But, we were the first team at Notre Dame to go to a bowl in 1970, 1969, I guess it was, or the January of 70, when we had a chance to be able to go to a bowl game for the first time in like 40 or 50 years. So it was a first time experience for so many of us, having been on the team. And then we went back the second year to play for a national championship. What we thought would be a voted upon national championship. And I've always believed if you beat number one, you're number one.
Yeah.
You don't automatically elevate number two to number one if you beat number one. But anyway, that's another story for another time. But as players, you're really involved in your preparation. You've worked so hard to get there. You want to show your skills. You want to show your abilities. It's a rare opportunity for some of the athletes to be able to show the scouts that they can play the game. And you want to be at your best. And so, you go through the practices and you don't have a lot of time as a player to be able to enjoy the sights. I mean, you'll get around a little bit, but you're really focused on playing a football game. We were focused on playing Texas.
And you, as a quarterback in the history of Notre Dame, Riley Leonard is someone that I spoke to when he was being recruited many years ago. Between Duke and Syracuse, he was choosing. He chose Duke. I was of no surprise to that. David Cutcliffe had worked with the Mannings and a bunch of quarterbacks that had found a place inside of the NFL. So he chose to go there for a few seasons and then ultimately came over to Notre Dame. I got to see him going into the game. It was great to see a friend again and spend some time. I'd love to get your thoughts, quarterback to quarterback, of the work that Riley Leonard did in his season at Notre Dame.
I think you have to. I think he did a terrific job. Just short answer, but I think you have to understand that in the Duke game last year, 2023, Duke Notre Dame, Riley got hurt towards the end of the year, and then he transferred to Notre Dame, but he never really had a chance to work in Mike Denbrock, who's the offensive coordinator's system, until almost the beginning of the season. He had very little mid-season work. He had very little training camp, only because he was recovering from injury. And I think in the beginning of the Riley Leonard you saw in the beginning of last year, this past season, and the Riley Leonard that you saw in the last game against Ohio State were entirely different Riley Leonards. One was a guy learning the system, figuring out what he was able to do. I think working himself back from injury. In the championship game, you saw somebody who could throw the football. We knew he could run, but I thought he continued to improve with his ability to throw the football. And I believe he's at the North-South game now to participate in that, which is great to go to an all-star game at the collegiate level. And Riley's going to get a chance to show his skill sets there. But I just saw constant improvement. His decision-making, his toughness is unquestionable. His ability to run, unquestionable. He just had to continue to work on throwing the football, and he did a great job doing that.
And we saw in the game, in the national championship game, a lot of people thought that it was out of hand, out of reach, and with under 5 minutes to play, it was a one-possession game, 31-23. Yep. To speak to that, like you said, Riley going through injury, and a great point that he wasn't working in the Mike Denbrock system because he was nursing himself back from injury, and that who we saw at the beginning of the season isn't the same as who we saw at the end of the season. Despite the loss, did Riley show you something that helps his NFL resume in that championship game?
Yeah, I think so. I think he showed the ability to throw the ball down the field quite well. He hung in the pocket. He didn't just automatically take off and run. And that's the biggest thing with the quarterbacks that have the athleticism to be able to make plays with their legs. Can you have the discipline to stay in the pocket, just that little extra beat, to be able to make a throw down the field that creates a big opportunity? I mean, I saw that. I think that's what a lot of people are looking at now. And of course, the invitation he got to go to to the North-South game is a chance to be around professional scouts, to learn from professional coaches, and be able to understand what you're going to have to do to get to the next level. Plus, the other thing that I think is in his favor is this isn't necessarily a very strong class coming out at the quarterback position. Sure. Not like it has been the last couple of years. So, and we in the NFL, there's 32 teams. Both teams, or all teams, carry at least two quarterbacks. So you have 64 roster spots for quarterbacks in the NFL. There aren't 64 quarterbacks out there that can flat play. Riley's better than some of them that are on rosters, I believe. So it's a chance for him to find a place and then do what he did so well. Learn the system, learn how to play the game, learn how to be a professional in that regard. And I think that's what he learned at the University of Notre Dame. That's the value of the University of Notre Dame. There's the athletic part of it, but there's the academic aspect of it as well. Now, we at the University of Notre Dame, I tell people all the time, nobody ever has to sleep other than on a bed when they travel around the world. Our family is far-reaching, and the University of Notre Dame has a tremendous reach when it comes to taking care of everybody, not just the student athlete, but the students that travel around the world as well. You become a very well-rounded person, and our players are that way. I mean, we've got some guys on that football team that are going to go number one. They're going to go, in the first round, I should say. And then Al Golden, our defensive coordinator, went on to take the DC job at Cincinnati for the Bengals. So, the resumes are strong for the people that have coached at the university and also for the players.
And you talk about those that have coached there. Marcus Freeman, I had my first opportunity to speak with him this season. And in his time at Notre Dame as the full-time head coach, we know that he went 9-4 in 2022, then he went 10-3, and then he went 14-2 and played for a national championship this season. Marcus Freeman, but you said well-rounded education. It's not just about football. It's not just about sports. I spoke with Marcus Freeman about the fact that his team so unapologetically speaks about God and their faith. We hear a lot of that from Riley Leonard. We hear it from Marcus Freeman, who became a Catholic, and we, continue to see it just spread throughout this team. It's unique, and I know you could speak to this better than anybody, but it is so unique, and it actually reminds me of my high school, Christian Brothers Academy, that when you go to a place like the University of Notre Dame, faith is not hidden. It is out in the open. It is there to be had, to learn, to have Bible study, to think of things greater than yourself. There's so much more to the education of the University of Notre Dame than just be a good football team. And I'd love for you to speak to it because you experienced it.
Well, yeah, one of my mandatory courses was theology when I was a freshman there. So you do learn about the church. You do learn about Catholicism, even though I was a Methodist. I believe this statistic is right. When we played the University of Texas my senior year, I believe there were more Catholics on the University of Texas starting football team than there were on the University of Notre Dame starting football team. It's a Catholic institution, but all religions are embraced. All people are embraced at the university. And it's a chance to be able to grow and learn about your faith, about things that, I think are important foundationally in life. We've just gotten away from some of the foundations that I think have made us as great as we are as a nation. The other ones like that is Jayden Daniels. He gives the Lord so much credit for what he's been able to accomplish. And that's an exceptional young man. Both of these young men are exceptional individuals.
And you led us perfectly into Jayden Daniels. My preseason prediction was that he would have the best season of all rookie quarterbacks for 2024. He absolutely had that, in my opinion. You had talked recently here that he checks all the boxes. What is it about Jayden Daniels to you that makes you believe that this start of his career, which was almost going to the Super Bowl, is just the beginning of what the Commanders are going to get?
I think there's a couple things, Dan, and actually more than a couple, but I'll just highlight a couple. Number one, his insatiable appetite to want to get better. That he wants to be better. He wants to be really great at his trade, not good, but great. And his composure. Nothing bothers him. He's very unflappable. The only time I ever saw him really get upset was when he got hurt and he couldn't go out on the field and play. That upset him that he couldn't go out and continue to compete. And somebody else deserves a lot of credit in this too, and that's Cliff Kingsbury. I think from a coordinator standpoint, when you have a rookie who's just learning the game and really doesn't have an idea what he's looking at on the other side of the ball, a thorough understanding of it, it's important that you get him involved in the game in a simple way. You run him a little bit. You get the ball out of his hands. You don't want to get him beat up and hit. I remember when, again, I've told this story umpteen times, and I'll tell it again. When Tom Moore, who's a great quarterback guru, was the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis, and he got Peyton Manning. I was sitting with Tom, and he said, listen, there's two things I'm not going to have happen to Peyton. I'm not going to let him get beat up physically, and I'm not going to let him get beat up mentally. And so he got the ball out of his hands quickly, which became a hallmark of what Peyton was able to do, to recognize and get the ball out of his hands so quickly. And I think Cliff has done the same thing with Jayden, giving him a chance to be able to make plays, get the ball out of his hands, move him a little bit. He has great running ability, and he's smart when he runs. Doesn't take the big hits, doesn't take the big shots. I mean, just as an example, 2 years ago, Anthony Richardson, as a rookie for the Indianapolis Colts, he winds up running with the football, and he's gone for 15 of the 17 games. Yeah. And so Jayden understands how to protect himself. And, I just think that, this is the interesting part now. Year two is when it gets interesting. C.J. Stroud had a tremendous rookie season with Houston, struggled a bit this year. Can your team stay healthy? That was one of the things the Commanders were able to do. They stayed pretty healthy this year, especially in the offensive line and wide receiver position. Are you going to be able to have everybody around you that you need to be able to do the things that you need to do? That's paramount. You look at the Chiefs and you look at the Eagles. They're fairly healthy. I mean, everybody thinks Jalen had a knee problem. He looked pretty darn good to me this past Sunday.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't see Jayden regressing. I don't see him taking a step back. I see him taking steps forward.
Yeah, and you being obviously a part of this Washington history, when you watch him and you see all of the things that he's capable, like you said, his willingness to learn, he doesn't seem rattled or shaken. He gives reverence to the Lord. He goes out there and he fights. He is not just a good runner, he's a smart runner. When you see him in all that he is, do you see Washington taking another step with him and getting to a Super Bowl?
Again, it's going to depend on how healthy you are.
Yeah.
Obviously, the defense, we were ranked 30th, I think, against the run this year. I think that's an area that they certainly want to improve on. Saquon had some incredible days against us, 148 in the first one, 150 in the second. We saw him break a big play on the first play and the third. To be able to stop the run is going to be paramount for this football team to get where they want to get to. Offensively, I think they're going to be in really good shape. Defensively, they're going to have to address really that one sort of major issue that was a problem for us.
And you broke this story here on the show a few years back here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora that they were going to be called the Commanders. What are your thoughts on the name now? I mean, is it flowing off the tongue or is it still strange?
Well, Dan, they've had such great success as the Commanders this year. They've had a number of names. You were the Redskins, and then you were the Washington football team. Then you became the Commanders. Now you've had success as the Commanders. That's certainly up to Josh Harris and the ownership group, Adam Peters, the general manager, the direction they want to go in. It looks like there's, things have been cleared for them to possibly be able to build a stadium where old RFK Stadium is downtown in Washington. And as far as the name goes, you've had success with this one. Yeah, I guess you got to ask yourself a question. Why would you move away from it? You've won so many football games with this particular name. All of a sudden, you're going to, sort of throw some questions up again. I'm thrilled with what they accomplished, whatever you want to call them.
Perfect answer. Before I let you go, Joe, I do want to get in quarterback to quarterback. Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, you mentioned him a little bit, but we spoke about Jayden Daniels, spoke a little bit about Jalen Hurts. Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, your thoughts on what they both are bringing to the table right now? Like Josh Allen, I mean, he puts the team on his back. He does everything he possibly can do. But I'd love to get your take on their matchup because the Bills and the Bills have their number in the regular season. The Chiefs have their number in the postseason. And I'm going to ask you this question, and I don't know where you're going to go with this, but I'm going to leave it open for you. People watch Chiefs games now and they expect the officials to get involved. I'd love to get your take on that too.
I just don't see the officials favoring one team or the other. They're under too much scrutiny. They're under too much examination. They miss calls. See, this is where I'm going to go with this. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take the Houston Texans Kansas City Chief game. There were two roughing the quarterback penalties in that game that were not roughing the quarterback. If we have technology available to correct errors, and certainly the game is moving at a speed where officials have to make a split-second decision. Their goal is to protect the quarterback at all costs, it seems. Not just Patrick, but all quarterbacks. If we have the technology to be able to examine that upstairs in the booth and say, no, that was not a roughing the passer. He never hit him in the head. He never grabbed his face mask, or he did grab his face mask. Why don't we use it? I mean, there are technological advances that allow us to do it.
Yeah.
There's you also, I think Josh Allen made the first down because one official said he did, and the other official said he didn't. And spotting a ball when people are under a pile of human beings is impossible to do correctly. I think what you're going to see in football is you're going to see a chip in the football. There's a friend of mine that basically has created technology called a downator. And if you cross that line with the football, it'll automatically alert the people upstairs or the officials that it's a first down. You don't even have to unpile them. You just basically know that it's a first down because the technology is available. My thing is if the technology's there, use it. One last point, Dan. I believe that you should be able to challenge every play in a football game. I don't want to give you any more challenges as coaches. You've got two. That's all you're going to get. But you should be able to challenge things like face masks. Do you believe that it wasn't a helmet to helmet contact? You believe it was, and it's tough to do it with holding. It's tough to do it with pass interference. I'll go back. And the league can change things. Remember a few years ago when there was this, if the receiver looked like he was going to come down inbounds, it was a catch. They got rid of that puppy in a year. Okay. That was gone in a year. And so I believe that we have technology available to make the game a little bit easier for the fans to understand. Certainly, it's an aid for officials. It's nothing against their abilities. Like I say, they have a very difficult job, but they want to get it right. But there's also rules that say, if this happens, this is the result. And so why not use the technology that's available? That's the way I look at it.
Perfect.
And here's the other thing. One other thing is if the ball touches the ground, it's incomplete. Period. No, did the ball move? Did he have his hand underneath it? If the ball touches the ground, it is an incomplete either interception or pass. Period. Let's make it as simple and easy as possible. Again, for the officials. Right. They can examine it. Ball touched the ground, incomplete pass. Let's move on.
Did the ball survive the ground? No. I mean, it's a perfect.
What is surviving the ground?
Right, and that's the other thing is they didn't even talk about that in the Chiefs game. Is like they're supposed to say, "Did it survive the ground?" Which is always up into somebody's definition of what survive means. So,
yeah. Anyway, it's great. It's the greatest of games. It's exciting. Two great teams are going to play. Philadelphia comes in. As healthy as they're probably going to be, and Kansas City comes in as well. They've got all their horses back, and I know the Chiefs are going for their third, and Philadelphia is having an opportunity to go back for the first time in just a couple of years. So, two very, very, very good football teams are going to play in the Super Bowl.
And my final note with you, Mr. Theismann, is I'm going to defer to you. Everybody asks you the questions on this show. I like to do a thing called rapid fire where we get to flip the script. So there's no preparation for this. You can ask me any question that comes to your mind when you're ready.
Who was your favorite team growing up?
NFL.
Yep.
Favorite team growing up. My favorite player is Dan Marino.
I asked what your favorite team was.
I know. And so it was Marino, but I guess I would say my first recorded favorite team were the Miami Dolphins because it was Marino, it was Irving Fryer, it was O.J. McDuffie. So I would say like my first memory of having a starter jacket was a Dolphins jacket. I'm saying that to a guy who beat the Dolphins in the Super Bowl, but that was the first recorded for me, but I kind of shifted to the Cowboys, not because they were winning, but because my best friend was a fan. So I knew more about the Cowboys than I knew about the Dolphins roster, so it kind of just made sense. I know both of my answers are not sufficient to a Washington alum. So
no, I have one other question for you.
Yes.
If you could have played one sport professionally, what sport would it have been and what position would it have been?
I love the question, and I'm still connected to it's one of the places I could shut my brain off. I played basketball growing up. I would play basketball. I would have loved to play professionally for the Toronto Raptors, and I would have played a guard. I'm not a big dude, so I would have definitely been a point guard. But yeah, I would have loved to play basketball professionally. That was a dream as a kid. And yeah, but I got to meet my hero. I got to meet Damon Stoudemire and got to interview him within the last couple of years. But my dream was that he was 20, I would be 21, and we would be on the same team. So
great.
Love the question from Joe Theismann. Joe, I know you're a humble guy. You're a giving guy. I want you to hang here for 1 second while I say this because I know that you're not going to take these accolades, but I have known you for over a decade. In the time that I've known you, when I text you, when I call you, you always reach back out. You've always made yourself available to me. You've been a friend, you've been kind. And when we had somebody that I knew going through cancer treatment, they asked me, they said, you know, Joe, could you ask him? He could say no, it's totally fine, but we're trying to raise money. I asked you for like a picture signed. You sent a jersey, you sent a football, you apologized that you couldn't send it fast enough. And we have a Washington fan in Jerry Hart that has battled cancer himself, and he is watching and listening right now. So I know that you've touched a lot of lives, you've helped a lot of people. And personally, for me, you've been humble, you've been kind, you've been a friend. You've always treated me like your time with me matters. And I just want to say thank you for the things that people don't see that you do, because not everybody's built like you. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, Dan, you humbled me. I appreciate those kind words, and I thank you very much. And it's, our relationship is important to me, and to be able to, one thing I learned, didn't learn it right away, but I've come to learn is that we're put on this earth for one reason and one reason only, and that's to serve others, not ourselves. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thank you, Joe. Have a wonderful start to your new year, and obviously blessings to you and your family, and I'll talk with you soon.
Okay, buddy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.